Hello, welcome to the first lecture video of week 8. So this week we will take a look at the chapter 6 drawing, and the the date is wrong, but I'm gonna fix that. And this is rather short chapter, so make sure to go and start reading the chapter, and you'll be able to read it in just one day. So it's really short. So let's take a look. So in this chapter, we will learn to identify the various materials used for drawing and discuss the way in which artists employ paper as medium. So first, let's take a look at what is drawn. So what is drawn? Do you guys draw? And have you guys drawn before? Well, it is true to say that everybody draws. I mean, at least one time in their life. Among young children, we can easily observe this, this basic urge for drawing. So, for instance, have you ever been to a restaurant that has like crayons and the tablecloth is actually like a large piece of paper that you can draw on? I think it was like a macaroni grill or something like that, but you know what I'm talking about. So even if we have left the habit of drawing behind with our childhood, we still have a familiar connection to it. So when you try to explain something, drawing out is the best way to do. So if someone asks for direction, drawing them a map is going to be the best way to show them how to get to the destination. So obviously artists often draw, and actually they do it a lot. So they do it to either quickly jot down ideas for later development, to investigate certain visual composition, or to plan for a larger scale work using it as some kind of a practice. So that was actually Pablo Picasso's case, who often draw for almost literally everything. And he also saved all of his sketches as well. So thanks to his habit of saving his drawings, we have almost a complete visual record of his creative process. So recognize this painting. So in this drawing on the right is a first sketch for his work Guernica, the painting on the left, about the violence during the early 20th century, and which is an example where we looked before. So we can see that a lot changed between this first sketched idea and the final painting, but the essential element is already in place, is still there, which is the lamp, revealing the horror of the violence. So a lot of artists from Renaissance use drawing as a practice to study and develop their own techniques. So to develop their eye, the taste or preference for the great art of the past, ambitious artists often took a trip to Italy or Rome to see and make a copy drawing of the famous public sculptures created by ancient Greek and contemporary masters. So this particular drawing that you're seeing is created by Flemish artist Peter van Lint when he was traveling to Italy, just like many other artists, like I mentioned. So this is a drawing of the famous sculpture known as the Vernisse Hercules, which was a Roman copy of antiquity, ancient Greek original discovered during excavation of Roman bathhouse. So Michelangelo is also famous for his habit of drawing. So he used drawing as a study of human figure before he actually implemented into a larger scale either sculpture or painting. So he often studied human muscles, posture, and how drapery falls on top of human body, and how different muscles work together to create certain kind of a proportion and things like that, as you can see in this example. So if you look at this drawing, do you recognize anything? It was a study drawing for one of his fresco painting for Sistine Chapel ceiling, the creation of Adam, the example where we looked before. So let's take a look at how Michelangelo he used drawing for his larger scale works. Also, during the Renaissance, Michelangelo's contemporary, Leonardo da Vinci, also drew a lot. However, unlike Michelangelo, Da Vinci often drew to study human anatomy and different area of science in sake of science instead of making an artwork. On the right, his study of the human, on the left actually, on the left, his study of human proportion, the famous drawing called the Vitruvian Man, and on the right, his study of embryo in the womb. So notice all these, the notes and the studies, and just, he was a very curious man, and he wanted to investigate a lot of things that he found interesting. So not only he was interested in human anatomy, Da Vinci was also fascinated with other area of science such as engineering. So here shows the example on how Da Vinci used to draw for his inventions and other engineered objects that he wanted to investigate. So on the left is a proposed drawing of a water lifting device. And on the right is his drawing of a wing construction for human, which to allow humans to fly. So these are some of the examples of how drawings can be used. But what can you draw with? So let's talk about the materials. So drawing media can be divided into two groups, dry and wet media. So dry media are things that we are most familiar with when we think of drawings. So such as a pencil, graphite, and etc. And dry medias are generally applied directly in stick form as the stick is dragged over an abrasive surface, which can be a piece of paper or canvas, and it leaves its particle behind, thus creating a stroke, a mark. But the wet media are things such as pen, brush, and ink. So in contrast to the dry media, wet media are generally applied with a tool such as a pen or brush, or sometimes spray. Alright, so let's take a look at different drawing materials and actually have some hands-on experience with them. So first is graphite. Graphite is a soft crystalline from a form of a carbon first discovered in 16th century. However, graphite itself is hard to use because it does not bind well by itself alone. So in 18th century, a technique was discovered for binding this powder graphite with fine clay to make a cylindrical drawing stick. So if you encase that into wood, it became what we know as a pencil. The different percentage of clay and the graphite ratio in the graphite compound allows manufacturers to produce pencils that range from very hard to very soft. So if you take a look at this chart, AB is the softest, meaning that it has more graphite. And then the 6H right here, it goes below than that, but still 6H is really hard, meaning that there's not a lot of the graphite in, but there's more clay into it. So if you ever draw something below 2H pencil, it almost feels like you're scratching you're carving the paper rather than you're actually drawing or writing on it. And it leaves such a thin and weak, not so much intense strokes. So you can see how the difference of the strokes. So the harder it gets, the line gets thinner, and then you can create more precise, but the lines are not as intense as the soft pencils here. And these harder pencils tends not to blend that well. Also, it's kind of hard to erase as well, because you tend to kind of push it through the paper, and then you end up scratching the paper itself. So one of the most common grade of pencil that we use, that yellow pencil with the pink eraser on the back, is HB, which sits right in the middle of the scale. And usually for art drawings, artists prefer soft pencils because it's easier to blend, and also it just To be honest, I don't know why they prefer it. I tend to prefer a little bit harder pencil because when it comes to drawing, I like to be more technical and precise. But a lot of people prefer 4B and up. So, but if it is too hard, it is going to be too hard to. If it is too hard, it is going to be too difficult to create any kind of a stroke or shading. So I guess that's why we artists prefer the softer pencils. So for the harder pencils such like this, it'll be better for like a technical drawing, and for shading and artistic purposes, soft pencils will be better. So here's an example of how graphite can be used to create an artwork. So graphite pencils are capable of creating thin and fine and more controlled strokes, and more forgiving since it's erasable with a piece of eraser. And it can be blended to create smooth gradation, and also can be pressed with pressure to create defined and intense strokes. So next material that we're going to be looking at is charcoal. So next common drawing material when it comes to art drawing is charcoal. So charcoal tends to create rougher strokes compared to the graphite, but it can easily be blended to create soft texture. So the particle is much lightly bonded with the drawing surface, which makes it more prone to accidental blending. So charcoal is much more difficult to draw with since it can get quite messy. So if you're gonna end up having like a really dirty hand, and then you're gonna start smudging all around your canvas. So when you're using the charcoal, you have to be careful where you touch with it because it's just gonna leave mark everywhere. And also the charcoal drawings, once the drawing is finished, you must put some kind of a fixative to prevent from particles falling away from the drawing surface. So you have to get one of these aerosol spray-on fixative to seal the painting so that it doesn't get smudged, or and the particle just fall off from the drawing surface. So here is an example that is drawn with charcoal, and notice the crude and rough strokes compared to the graphite and other materials. But much more intense lines definitely with the charcoals you can achieve. Next is crayons and pastels, and they are made of powdered pigment mixed with different type of binders. So for crayons, wax or grease is used to bind the pigments together. Excuse me. These waxy crayons tend to create discrete strokes and that are hard to blend or layer, and it is also very difficult to erase, almost impossible, because if you ever work with wax, it gets to everywhere, and only way to erase it is to heat it up and then just wipe it away. Even if you do that, it still leaves the mark. So generally the wax is just very messy material, and so crayons are practically wax mixed with pigments, so it tends to be really messy. And pastel on the right is binded with the non-greasy binder, such as like a solution of gum arabic. And so most artists prefer soft pastel because they leave a velvet-like line of almost pure pigment. And harder pastel is often used to create special effects such as highlights and darker areas and things like that. And harder pastel is often used to create special effects and details. So pastel strokes can be easily blended by blurring one color into another, creating really smooth graduated tones. And it is very, if you work with the pastel, you can achieve something really pretty with so less effort, because they just tend to mix so well. Here, Edgar Degas' work is a great example of taking advantage of the strength of the pastel. Notice how he was able to create this kind of a smooth transition of the value within this figure, at the same time mixing the entire color all around his drawing surface. Alright, so next we're going to take a look at the wet media. So first thing that we're going to be looking at is pen and ink. So drawing inks generally are made of ultrafine particles of pigment suspended in water. So gum arabic is often used to hold the particles in suspension and help them to adhere to the drawing surface. Pen and ink can create very sharp and intense line that is free of creating smudge or accidental blending. So it can create very precise and accurate strokes charged with energy with little to none pressure applied. So if you want to make like an intense line with the pencil, you really have to push and press the pencil against the paper, but with the ink and pencil, it is done so effortlessly. So this property can work as an advantage and disadvantage at the same time, since artists must use different technique to create shade when pen and ink are used. So we're gonna take a look at this when I start working on the hands-on activity. And also brush and ink can be used. So the soft and supple brushes used for watercolor can also be used with ink. So its stroke shares similar properties as with pens. However, it's more difficult to control the stroke because the soft tip of the brush is hard to because it's soft and it's gonna go if you put too much pressure, it's gonna the shape of the brush tip is going to change, and then thus you'll have like an unintended variation in line quality. So this soft tip can create a variation in thickness and line quality, which we can see in this example. So even though this is just one stroke, you can see this kind of a different varying thickness of the line and things like that. So if you were to create this kind of effect with pen, we're going to have to actually fill it in with the tiny little strokes until we create this kind of shape rather than a stroke. Excuse me. So let's quickly take a look at how they pushed the boundary of drawing during the early 20th century. So for a century, paper was it was an artisanal product made by hand one sheet at a time. But with the rise of technology and different inventions, paper has become an ubiquitous material we know today. So when first they found a way to mass produce the paper, it started to become being everywhere in newspapers, magazines, advertising poster, and things like that. So in early 1900, artists started to use paper, the material itself, as a main medium for their artwork. So the first step was taken by Pablo Picasso, who pasted a bit of a patterned oilcloth onto a painting of a still life. But his fellow Cubist friend, Georges Braque, which is his example right here, is the one who later began to experiment this technique in more depth. So he started to bring in pieces of mass-produced printed paper directly into his drawings, as you can see in this example. So rectangular shape slice from a newspaper and imitation wood grain wallpaper have been incorporated into this abstracted charcoal drawing of a cafe table set with a wine glass and a bottle. So this technique later became known as a papier-collé, the French for pasted paper, and also the broader term for this kind of a thing is called collage, again from the French for pasting or gluing. So that is it with the lecture for chapter 6. But now let's take a look at using different materials in real life. So let me change the charcoal everywhere on my hand. The camera view. Give me 1 second. There we go. Oh, that was rather easy. So here I have a pencil, drawing pencil. This is the only pencil that I could find. I don't know where all my drawing pencils go, but I'm not sure what the grade is, but I feel like this is very hard pencil, maybe 2H. But also I have this mechanical pencil. So the lead right here is actually graphite, just like how the pencil is. So I believe that is HB. So number 2 is actually HB. So we 2H in HB. And next I have a charcoal right over here. And so they come in like they come in this kind of a this. Oh, look at that! Already is everywhere. They come in this kind of a stick form so that you can hold it and then draw with it. This is one of the reasons why I don't like working with charcoal, because it gets everywhere. 1 second. I prefer charcoal pencils. I can just control it much better. And next we have like a certain pens, drawing pens. So these are filled with ink with a little bit of a cloth or metal tips here. This is from like 2008, so I'm not sure they're still I'm not sure they're still gonna work. But this is also the artist pen. So not that's an eraser. This is a pen, but it's supposed to mimic like a brush, so it has this really soft tip, as you can see right here. So this is kind of a hybrid between pen and the brush. So I can create this kind of a variation of line quality with using this kind of tools and drawing material. Next, I have an artist crayon. So the mixed with the oil grease binder. So this is that. And next thing that I have is good old color pencil. Yeah. So let's take a look at how these can be used to create the shade, the value scale. So with the graphite, it's really easy, just like what we did for the activity that we did for, I think it was chapter 4, yeah, the chapter for visual elements. So you just put the least amount of the pressure for this box right here, so it's supposed to be the lightest. So just do that, and I just build up more pressure, and I could even use the crosshatch. So notice how I can control my stroke, but you'll see when I start using charcoal, it's gonna get everywhere. So I'm just gonna keep on working on it. The pencils, I'm gonna use a mechanical pencil. Pencils, I can have so much better control and kind of mimic the feeling of the charcoal as well, but not as quite, but still. And also it's one of the few erasable material. So yeah, I think I like drawing with graphite than charcoal. Maybe that is because of my lack of skills with it, but hey. So we can continue, so you can see how I can control my strokes a lot better by using the graphite. Also, graphite is, I mentioned that is blendable, meaning that if I were to take like a tissue and then blend it, it's gonna get blended to create this kind of a soft texture, but not as much as charcoal, which you'll get to see soon. But if I have like a softer pencil, like something like 8B, it'll get blended much better. So let's take a look. So notice how I can just blend this and almost create this kind of a one flat surface by blending with. All right, next we're gonna work with charcoal. I'm a little scared now. It's gonna get everywhere on my desk. But hey, let's be careful with it. So this is piece of charcoal. and just by holding it, it's already on my hand. So you need to have some kind of paper towel just to wipe your hand. And I'm gonna start drawing with this charcoal, but it is really hard to make like a really soft or light value with charcoal because it is so intense. See how intense that is? Whoa. I'm putting zero pressure. So almost I'm putting zero pressure and it is already making this really intense strokes. But one of the way to make it a little bit thinner or lighter is to use the technique of blending. So notice how easy that is to blend with charcoal. And the kind of the texture that charcoal creates when it's blended is quite distinctive compared to the graphite. So it is rougher, I think. So people who likes this kind of texture really likes charcoal because of this kind of a texture that it creates. So I'm gonna grab a. So if you blend with your finger, you're actually pushing in the oil into the paper as well. So it tends to create different kind of texture. But if I take like a tissue or like a blending stick, it's gonna make it a little bit thinner. Something like that. So I can take a eraser and then just clean it up a little bit. Actually, it's just gonna get messy, so I'm just gonna do it later. But okay, the next box, I'm gonna add a little bit of charcoal there, and then I'm gonna take a tissue and then blending. So I'm not a big fan of the blending when it comes to drawing, but to create a value scale with the charcoal is kind of necessary. So it's everywhere. So I can use my razor to clean it up a little bit. And also, if you blend it with too much pressure, it's gonna be kind of hard to erase later on. So yeah, that's what. Okay, and then let's just make one more box. See how intense that is? I'm putting zero pressure, but still it's creating this really, really strong strokes. So let's just blend it in a little bit. So when you're working with charcoal, it is good to have like some kind of blending stick that you can get from like Art Supply or Michaels. That is really useful when you're working with the charcoal. So if you if you're going to take like a drawing class, that is one of the things that you are going to have to buy. Okay, so see how much graphite is so easier to control compared to the charcoal. But charcoal has this such much stronger and more intense stroke quality, the mark making quality or mark making ability, I'll say, compared to the graphite. And sometimes if you use one of these hard erasers, it's really hard to erase, but there you go. So even though the charcoal strokes have really this rough texture to it, by blending with a piece of tissue you can create this really soft texture. Next is pen. So let's take a look at one of the pens. So I'm gonna use something a little bit thicker, which is 0.5 0.3. Let's use 0.3. Alrighty, so wow, it still works. Amazing. The pen here, obviously, just like the charcoal, maybe more so. Even if I put zero pressure, it's gonna make really strong mark because it is filled with ink. See that? Whereas if I were to take a pencil and then put zero pressure, I could draw really thin and light lines, but with pen it is impossible. So how can you make a shade? How can you make a value scale with pen? So one of the most popular technique is to create a cross hatching. So cross hatching means that you just cross hatch your lines. So I'm gonna create this kind of really thin lines like this. I'm gonna leave it like that. But next I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna go make a line that cross hatches those lines that I just made. There we go. Maybe I'm gonna add lines in between the lines that I just created, just to kind of create stronger value difference between these two. And then the next one, we can start making a little bit thicker lines. Not thicker lines, more defined lines. And more lines. Just to kind of fill up the space like this. So this is how you can shade, create a value scale with pen. So if we come to like somewhere here, we can start really pushing in. Oh yeah, this pen is dried up. Really put the lines close to each other. And use this technique of cross-hatching to create a value. Okay, so if I just continue to do that, it's gonna get darker. Alright, next crayon. So this is going to be kind of difficult because, like I said, crayon, they don't tend to mix well together, and it's really hard to layer them as well. So let's take a look. Let's take orange crayon, something like this. So let's just test it and what it feels like. Alright, so this is kind of a, but if you try this, you can feel that it is very greasy just by feeling that resistive feeling against this paper. I can tell that this is very oily crayon. So with the crayon, still, unlike the charcoal pencil, we can kind of create like a really light stroke just by not putting any kind of pressure to it. But let's see if this is, let's see this, we can blend this. A little bit. Alright, so crayon, with this artist crayon, because it's a higher quality than those you get, those when you, the Crayolas ones. So you can kind of blend it a little bit. But if I had a pastel, it would be much easier to blend to create this kind of a really smooth transition. So let's go over here and then see if what if I make like a really thick lines like this and try to blend it. Is it gonna get blended? I don't know, let's find out. Yeah, a little bit, but still it kind of has that, it retains that initial strokes. So, but if this was pastel, if I were to just do the one swipe, everything's just gonna get mixed up because it is mixed with non-greased, this very light materials. They're almost like a powdery material. So that is different. So unfortunately, I don't have a pastel right now, but that is the difference between the crayons and pastel. So this is not going to be an assignment because I don't expect you guys to buy all these materials and then, you know, play around with this. But if you have the materials, you know, by all means, experience with them. So start is always best to learn by doing it. So you will not be able to fully understand what I mean until you actually try it on the piece of paper. So if you have that, please, you know, get some experience with the materials. But if not, that is totally fine. And don't go to Walmart or Michael's and just spend tens of dollars on this art supplies. I'm not requiring you guys to do that. So we will have a separate hands-on activity next class. For this one, it is just for the purpose of for the lecture material. Get in there. Alrighty, so that is it for today's lecture. I know that the chapter 6 is really short, so make sure to read it as soon as possible. And next class, we're gonna take a look at either chapter 7 or we're gonna take a deeper look at how these different materials can be used to create a composition. So I'll see you guys on Thursday. Well, actually Wednesday night. All right, bye.